How many listings must you always carry to truly be in the business? Right? 10. And if you don't have 10 listings right now, at least 10, some of you have more than that, I know that. But if you don't have 10 listings, that has to be your singular focus as a realtor. Because there's something magical that just happens with 10 listings, right? I mean, how many of you have 10 right now? Okay, you got 10, you know what I'm talking about. If you've had 10 and you don't have 10 now, you know what I'm talking about. It's just different when you have 10, right? And if you have 10, can you lever it and can you get to 20? I think that for us in this career, for people in this career, listings are the thing, right? Now, having said that, listings are a very competitive game, right? It is uber competitive when you're in the listing arena, even if you're not even competing physically face-to-face with another realtor. It's still competitive. And it's competitive because of all of the information that the public now has, right? I mean, how many times do you go into a listing and they've already checked their house out on Zillow, right? They've already got all this information. So what I would propose to you is the listing presentation, the listing process is crucial. And how many of you are I know I've asked this before, but I don't remember how many hands. How many of you are one-step listing people?
What do you mean by one step?
I call you today, I said I'd like to talk to you about listing my house, and you go over the questionnaire with me or whatever on the phone, you get some basic information about my house, you run a CMA, you come out to my house, you go through my house, you look around, we have a conversation, we sit down at the table, and you talk to me about listing my house and what it's worth. You're in and out in one step.
I can do that.
I need to be, but I'm not.
I am.
Okay, wait a minute, give me a hint. How many people do it that way? Okay, and how many people are two-step people?
Well.
I think it depends on that listing sometimes.
You can do it both ways.
You can definitely do it both ways.
Do it both ways, and then it just depends if you're talking about a past client, or you're talking about somebody brand new, or what. So
Or if they're interviewing others.
So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I held an open house last week and it was already sold, but I did it because open houses get me new business. I mean, it's whatever you do.
Okay. You can do it both ways. Okay? I would contend for most of us in the room, in a competitive environment, you need to start doing two steps. Because I think two steps kills one step. If the two-step person knows what they're doing and knows how to position it, if you're competing face-to-face with an agent that you know does a one-step listing, okay, you can get the listing almost every time. I think you need to somebody just test this out for me and try it, okay? I think you go two different times, all right? I think there's a walk and talk of this presentation. I think there's a static way that you do things. And I think it becomes your process. Anytime we're talking to someone new, okay, or even a past client, anytime we're just talking to someone, what we're trying to do is identify a potential client. We're not trying to turn people into clients. We're trying to identify, are you a possible client for me or not? Right? And I do believe this thing is a battle of processes. And if you don't stick with your process and understand your process, you'll end up in the middle of theirs. And sometimes you find out you don't like their process when you get into it. And I also believe that every relationship breaks down over a lack of checking off on expectations. But the problem is expectation dialogue doesn't happen. You have to go there, right? And so what happens sometimes is you go in, you do the one-step listing presentation. You get the listing, but you don't really have the expectation conversation. But you got the listing. And everything's really good and rosy in the very beginning of the listing, right? I mean, you're taking the pictures and you're putting it on the website, and you're calling them back and saying, here's your flyers, and now we're on the websites, and we're this, we're that, and the other. Where it trips you up is about 3 months into the deal, right? Because all of a sudden, 3 months in, they start calling you saying, what are you going to do now? Because their expectation of what you were going to do, their expectation and your and what you do now does not match up, and it becomes stressful. And so we slow down on the amount of time that we call them. So that creates even more stress. So then they start calling saying, well, I expected you to do this, right?
And you didn't tell them.
And you didn't tell them you weren't going to do that. And actually, maybe in the presentation, you never would have even told them you don't do that, because you're willing to reinvent yourself depending on who you're talking to. Right? I mean, I don't do open house. Say I don't do open houses. And I know I don't do open houses. But it's a successful mission if I get your house listed and I don't ever have to mention that I don't do open houses. And in the very beginning, they're cool with it. Because they're excited, I'm calling them with the new pictures and the info sheets, and they're getting showings and all that stuff. But then 3 months later, the shit hasn't sold, maybe because we didn't really stay in our process on pricing, right? And even though we knew what it was worth, we took it at a little higher price and figured we'd maybe fix it later. And thereby setting the expectation for the seller they were actually going to get that much money. And so like 3 months in, they call one day and they go, hey, traffic's falling off. I'm about an open. Oh, I don't do opens. What do you mean you don't do opens? Yeah, I don't do opens. Did I not bring that up? Did I not mention that? Or I don't do this ad or that. It doesn't have to be opens. It could be anything, right? So I think we have to cover all that on the front end. Just getting a listing is awesome sometimes. Sometimes it's not so awesome, right? And so 3 months later, now we're stressed. 3 months later, we look at the phone and we go, oh God, it's them. And I know I should have called them last week, but I didn't. And I'm not really prepared for this phone call right now, so I'm not going to answer the phone. You ever had that? Have you ever done that? Right? Well, no, Joe, you haven't. I'm sure you haven't. You're always the outlier. That's why you, no, seriously, that's why you make the level of income that you do. That's why you have the clients that you do. Seriously. But for the rest of us, right, it's like, I'll call them later, right? And then you got, get inside the seller's head. Now my realtor doesn't even answer my phone calls. I expected them to answer my phone calls, right? Oh, but we didn't have that conversation either in the listing, did we? Really? We didn't really have that communication conversation. So I'm saying this. It's a two-step process.